Welcome to Archive Whispers, a place to fall asleep. Settle in, lower the lights, and let the archive open.
Tonight, an Ottoman city in the last grey hour before dawn, in a season when the mornings come cool and unhurried, and the long covered streets of its great market still lie locked and dark. At the very heart of that market stands a low building of heavy stone, crowned with shallow lead domes, its iron doors barred from within. The Bedestan, the strong, quiet vault where the city keeps the things it most wishes to keep safe. We are going to watch, slowly, as one ordinary morning gathers around it and the doors come open. There is nothing urgent here, and nothing about to happen. The traders are still asleep in their houses across the sleeping quarters. The watchman has nearly finished his round. The first thin call to prayer has not yet crossed the rooftops. We will simply stay and let the market wake the way it has woken for 100 mornings before this one, unhurried and exact, until the stone hall fills with the soft business of an ordinary day. Before the doors of the Bedestan, an old man has spent the night. He is the night watchman, the Bekshi, and his whole work is to be awake while the city is not. He has walked the same loop until he knows it in the dark, the turn at the fountain, the dip where the paving has sunk, the place where a draught comes cold off the inner courtyard. A lantern hangs from his hand, its small flame steadied behind horn, throwing a low circle of amber that travels with him over the stone. The Bedestan he guards is, in plain terms, the safest box in the whole city. Its walls are thick enough to turn a fire, its few doors are iron and heavy, and once they are barred at night, no ordinary mischance can reach what lies within. So merchants from the open rows outside carry their best goods in here at dusk and lock them away. And people who own no shop at all bring their coin and their jewels and their deeds of property to be kept behind these walls, as one might leave a thing with the one neighbor who never sleeps. Inside, the hall is wholly dark and wholly still. The watchman cannot see it, but he carries it in his mind, the rows of shuttered cells along the walls, the low cupboard niches set into the stone, the iron-bound chests pushed close together in the middle of the floor, each one holding the careful weight of somebody's year. Cold air moves through the great room without sound, drawn under the doors and up toward the small windows beneath the domes, and the whole vault seems to breathe, very slowly, in the dark, the way a deep cave breathes. Above the rooftops, somewhere off to the east, the sky has begun the slow change that is not yet light, only a thinning of the black into a deep and ashen gray. The watchman knows this color better than any clock. He has seen it come 1,000 times over the same line of domes and chimneys, and he reads from it that his night is nearly done, that within the hour the first muezzin will climb his stair, and the great machine of the market will begin, joint by joint, to move. He passes the public fountain at the corner, where water runs all night under a carved stone canopy, falling into its basin in a thin, unbroken thread. By day, the fountain is a crowded place, with porters and water sellers and children waiting their turn. Now it belongs only to itself, and to him, and the sound of the falling water is the loudest thing in the street. He stops a moment, as he always does, and lets the cold air settle on his face, and feels how close the morning is. The covered streets around the Bedestan are a small city of their own, roofed against sun and rain, branching in long vaulted rows that the people call by the trades that fill them. There is a row of the slipper makers, and a row of the quilt makers, and a row where nothing is sold but thread and needles and the small bright things of sewing. In the dark, they are all the same, only shuttered fronts and the long perspective of arches, but each one waits, in its own way, for the particular hands that will open it. Then it comes, the sound the watchman has been waiting for, from the nearest minaret, high and thin and unhurried, the first call to prayer of the day. The call, they say, is sweeter than all the others, because it must also gently wake the sleeping. It crosses the rooftops and is answered, a little later and a little farther off, by a second voice, and then a third, until the whole gray air of the city is laced with the slow overlapping of them, rising and falling, and never quite in time. In the houses of the merchants, in the quiet residential lanes some way off from the market, the call enters through wooden lattices and finds people half awake already. A textile dealer rises in the dark and washes in cold water from a copper basin, and his wife sets out bread and olives and a little white cheese and a cup of something warm. None of it is hurried. The morning has a shape they all know, and they move through it the way a hand moves through a familiar prayer, without needing to think about the order of things. The watchman, meanwhile, has come back round to the great doors of the bedestin, and here his night truly ends. He does not carry the keys, that is not his trust. His task was only to keep the dark hours honest, to walk and to look and to be present, so that anyone who meant harm would know that someone watched. Now he waits, leaning a little on the cold stone, for the men who hold the keys to come, and he listens to the calls fade, one by one, back into the ordinary silence of the streets. Light, when it begins in earnest, does not arrive in one stroke. It seeps. The gray in the east warms by the smallest degree toward a pale and dusty gold, and the line of domes that was only a silhouette begins to show its lead grown soft and silver with dew. Down in the covered streets nothing changes yet, for the roofs hold the night a while longer. But at the open mouths of the market, where the arcades give onto a square, the first true color of the day lies along the tops of the walls like a thin, warm hand. Now the streets begin to gather their first walkers. A water seller passes with his great skin slung across his back and his cups chained at his belt, going toward the fountain to fill before the crowds. A pair of porters come stretching and yawning from wherever they slept, ready to carry whatever the day will ask them to carry. A cat that has owned these arcades all night long sits in the middle of the cold floor and watches them with the patience of something that has nowhere in particular to be. Down one of the residential lanes, the textile dealer is on his way to work. He walks without hurry, a man of middle years in a long quilted coat with a folded cloth bag under his arm and his mind already half inside the day's accounts. He greets the few he passes by name or by trade, with the small, unvarying courtesies that hold a neighborhood together. The light grows around him as he goes, and the shuttered shops he passes are beginning, here and there, to show a thread of lamplight at their seams. He is one of perhaps 100 men whose mornings all bend, by long habit, toward the same low stone building. Some of them keep cells inside the bedestin itself, the small shuttered booths where the most valuable goods are sold. Others keep open shops in the rows outside but store their finest stock within the vault overnight and must go in first to fetch it. All of them, in their different ways, are waking now and turning their steps the same direction, like water finding, without being told, the one channel that leads downhill. And so the first chapter of the morning closes the way it began, with the doors still shut and the great hall still dark behind them, but with everything now leaning toward the moment of opening. The watchman waits, the light climbs, the merchants come on through the brightening streets, the cat keeps its patient seat upon the cold stone. Nothing has happened that anyone would remember, and that in this place is exactly as it should be. We have only to stay a little longer and watch the keys arrive. The keys come with the warden of the bedestin, the man the traders call the kethuda, the elected elder who answers for the whole hall and for the conduct of the men within it. He is not a young man, and he does not walk quickly, and the small crowd of merchants who have gathered at the doors makes way for him without being asked. 2 senior traders walk a pace behind, for the unlocking is never done alone. It is a thing witnessed, so that no one man ever stands by himself between the city and what the city has entrusted to these walls. The unlocking itself is slow and a little solemn, the way old necessary things become almost without meaning to. There is more than one lock and more than one bar, and each is worked in its turn with a particular key and a particular knack learned by hand over years. The iron is cold and stiff with the night. It gives way grudgingly, with a deep, dry grinding that the watchers feel in their teeth, and then with a heavier sound as the great wooden bar is lifted from its brackets and set carefully aside against the wall. When the doors at last swing inward, they do it heavily, on hinges that have carried their weight for generations, and out of the dark mouth they open comes a breath of the hall's own air, cool and dry, and faintly sweet with the smell of stored cloth and old timber and stone that the sun has not touched in many hours. The men at the threshold feel it move past them into the brightening street, the night air of the strong room giving way, at last, to the ordinary morning of the world outside. The Kethuda steps in first, and the others follow, and for a little while the hall swallows them whole, for the daylight reaches only a few paces past the doors and then surrenders to the dark. So the first work of every morning is the making of light. A man goes along the near wall with a taper, touching it to the wicks of the oil lamps set in their iron brackets, and one by one the small flames take and steady, and small pools of amber bloom along the stone, and the great room begins, very slowly, to give back its shape, and then the building begins to help. High in the center of each shallow dome there are small windows, set in rings around the crown, and as the sun lifts somewhere beyond the rooftops, these begin to fill with a pale and growing light. It comes down in soft shafts through the dusty air, falling in slow ovals upon the floor, moving so gradually that the eye cannot catch the movement, only notice, after a time, that an oval of light has crept from one chest to the next, and that the lamps are no longer quite needed. While the light does its slow work, the floor is swept. A pair of young apprentices move down the long aisles with brooms of bound twigs, gathering the day's dust and the small leavings of the night into careful heaps, working without speech, half asleep still, in the way of those who have learned a task so well that the body does it while the mind drifts elsewhere. The dry rasp of the brooms travels up into the domes and comes back softened, and for a while it is the only sound in all that great hall. Before any business is done, the warden speaks a few quiet words for the day, as is the custom, a short asking for honest dealing and for a measure of blessing upon the trade, the kind of words that are less a ceremony than a habit of the heart, spoken half under the breath while the lamps still burn. The men around him answer softly and touch their breasts, and that is all. No bargain has yet been struck, no coin yet changed, but the morning has now, in the old understanding, properly begun. Now the cells begin to open. Around the inner walls of the Beedeston run rows of small shuttered booths, each one the standing place of a single trader, scarcely wider than a man with his arms a little spread. Their owners come to them and draw back the wooden shutters that fold down by day into low counters, and prop them, and unhook the small lamps within, and the long wall that was blank and dark a moment ago becomes a row of little lit rooms, each with its keeper settling into it like a bird returning to a known ledge. Those who keep their goods in the great iron chests go to them now, and here the knight's trust is quietly redeemed. Each chest bears a small seal of wax or lead pressed over the join of the lid, set there by its owner the evening before, and the first thing he does is bend close and look at it, and feel it with his thumb, to know that it is his own and that it has not been touched. Only when he is satisfied does he break it, and lift the heavy lid, and look down into the careful dark of his own keeping. Out of the chests and the wall niches the goods come into the lamplight, and they are, for the most part, the small and costly things of the world. Bolts of silk wrapped in plain cloth to hide their color until the moment of showing, folded lengths of velvet and figured brocade, little leather cases of worked silver, of buckles and clasps and the fittings of belts, purses of coin counted and tied, here and there a paper of loose stones, or a string of amber, or a single bound ledger worth more than all the rest, because it holds the record of who owes whom. The hall has its own smell now, fully woken, and anyone who knew it blindfolded would know it still. Under everything is the cool mineral smell of old stone and lime. Over that, the dry sweetness of stored cloth, of silk and wool, and the cedar shavings tucked among them to keep the moth away, and threaded through it, fainter. The smells of the lamps, of warm oil and a little smoke, and of the people themselves, of wool coats and clean skin, and the coffee some of them have already begun, somewhere, to make. By now the light from above has won. The oil lamps still burn, but their pools have grown pale and almost colorless against the broadening day, and one by one their keepers reach up and pinch them out, and a thin gray ribbon of smoke climbs from each toward the high windows and is lost. The hall stands fully lit at last in its own proper light, the soft, even daylight of a domed stone room in which nothing glares and nothing is wholly dark, and the colors of the goods come quietly true. The traders arrange their booths with the unthinking care of long practice, each thing in the place it has always had. The cloth seller folds his best length so that one corner falls open to show the pattern. The dealer in small silver sets his pieces on a square of dark felt so that they catch the light. The seller of stones tilts his little tray toward the window. None of it is done to deceive, only to show a thing well, the way a host arranges a room before a guest, and when it is finished each man sits and waits, and the morning's true business stands ready to come in at the doors. Out at the threshold, the great doors now stand fully open, fastened back, and the dark mouth of the night before has become only an ordinary doorway full of mourning. The watchman has gone home to sleep at last. The street outside has filled with the noise of a waking market, with footsteps and greetings and the rattle of the first handcarts, and into that noise the still, cool, ordered calm of the Bedestan opens like a deep pool beside a running stream, the one place that does not hurry, even now. It is worth pausing while the morning settles, to consider the building itself, for it is a strange and particular thing, this Bedestan, and not at all like an ordinary market. In most towns of any size there stands one such hall at the very center of the trading streets, often the oldest stone building among them, and very often the first thing a founder built when he wished to raise a market at all, knowing that without a strong, safe heart, the rest would never thrive. The shops outside might come and go, the Bedestan endured. Its plan is simple and made for strength. A rectangle of thick masonry walls encloses a single great room, and that room is roofed not with timber, which burns, but with a row of shallow domes of brick and stone, carried on heavy piers, so that the whole covering is of the same incombustible matter as the walls. There are only a few doors set in the middle of each side, narrow for their height and sheathed in iron, and there are no windows low enough for a man to reach, only the small ones high in the domes that give light and nothing else. All of this is built against a single great fear, which is fire. In a city of wooden houses and narrow lanes, where a tipped lamp or a careless hearth could carry off a whole quarter in a night, the Bedestan was the one place a man could believe his goods would still be there in the morning. Its stone would not catch, its iron doors would hold, and so, over the years, it became not only a market, but a kind of treasury, the strong room not of a prince, but of an entire trading town, holding in trust the portable wealth of hundreds. And so the things kept here are not only goods for sale. A widow with no one to guard her house will bring her small store of gold and leave it sealed in a chest within these walls, paying a little for the keeping, and sleep easier for it. A man going on a long journey or off to a war will lodge his deeds and his ready money here against his return or against his not returning. The guardians of orphans will lodge the orphan's inheritance here until the children are grown, and the court itself will sometimes order a disputed sum held in the Bedestan until the judges have decided whose it is. What makes all this possible is not really the stone, or the iron, or even the watchman, but a thing far harder to build, which is trust. The Bedestan works because everyone agrees that it works, because 100 years of mornings like this one have laid down, layer on quiet layer, the settled certainty that goods left here come back, that seals are not broken, that the men who hold the keys hold them honestly. It is an old human invention, this safe place at the center, older than any single building, and the stone is only its visible shape. The hall is governed, lightly but firmly, by its own community of traders. They are organized into guilds, one for each craft and trade, and each guild has its elders and its warden, and its long unwritten code of how things are properly done. A man does not simply decide to keep a booth in the Bedestan. He must be of the right trade, vouched for by those already within, schooled through his years as apprentice and journeyman, and only then, when the elders judge him ready, and a place falls vacant, admitted to a standing of his own among them. These guilds do more than guard their crafts. They set the fair price of things, and the proper weight, and the honest measure, so that a stranger buying in the Bedestan need not fear being cheated more than a neighbor would be. They look after their own, the man who falls ill, the widow of a member, the apprentice with no family. They settle small quarrels among themselves before such things ever trouble a judge, and they carry altogether a shared good name, for the whole guild is shamed by the dishonesty of any one of its members, and so each man is watched gently by all the rest. Over them all, beyond the guilds, there stands the inspector of the market, the man whose office is to see that the laws of buying and selling are kept. He or his deputy will pass through the Bedestan and the streets around it in the course of the morning, glancing at a scale here, a measure there, asking the price of a thing and weighing in his mind whether it is just. He carries the authority of the judge and beyond him of the ruler. And though he is, most mornings, only a quiet figure passing through, the knowledge that he may come keeps a great many small temptations from ever being acted on. The building belongs, in the deepest sense, to no one of the men who use it. Long ago it was raised as a pious endowment, its rents set aside to pay forever for some good work, the upkeep of a mosque perhaps, or a soup kitchen for the poor, or a fountain, or a school. So every booth rent and every keeping fee paid here this morning flows, by the will of a founder long dead, toward the feeding or teaching or sheltering of people the traders will never meet. The hall earns its keep, and a little more, and the more goes quietly out into the city as charity. There is a hierarchy among the trades that keep the Bedestan, and it is written in nothing but custom, yet everyone knows it. Nearest the place of honor sit the dealers in the most precious things, the jewelers and the sellers of fine cloth of gold, whose stock is small enough to hold in 2 hands and dear enough to buy a house. Around them are the merchants of silk and good woolens, and beyond, toward the doors, the trades in lesser but still trusted goods. A man may rise through this order in the course of a life, or his sons may, but no one jumps it, and no one forgets where he stands. All of this the morning carries lightly, as it carries everything. The traders do not think, as they settle into their places, about endowments or hierarchies or the long inheritance of trust. They think about the day's stock and a debt to be collected, and whether the man who promised to come yesterday will come today. The great old order holds them up exactly as the stone floor holds them up, without their needing to notice it, and they go about their small business standing, all unknowing, on its patient and invisible strength. And the day, for its part, goes on lightening. The shafts from the dome windows have lost their first paleness and lie now in clean, warm bars across the floor. And the dust that turns in them is the same dust that has turned in this light every morning for longer than anyone alive can remember. A sparrow that has come in through an open door flits up among the high arches and finds its way out again. The hall waits, lit and swept and ready, for the people of the city to begin, in their slow ones and twos, to come in and buy. Let us walk slowly among the men who keep the booths and see what each of them does with his morning. Near the place of honor sits the jeweler, an old and careful man with a face creased into permanent mildness, who deals in things no larger than a thumbnail and dearer than anything else for sale in the city. His whole stock fits in a single locked box, and from it he takes, one at a time, a ring set with a pale stone, a pair of earrings, a clasp of worked gold, and lays each on a square of dark cloth where the morning light can find it. Beside him, or not far off, sits the dealer in fine cloth, a younger and broader man whose trade is all in the unrolling. His goods are silks from the looms of the great weaving towns, and brocades shot with metal thread, and lengths of plain good wool, and the art of selling them lies in the showing. With a single practiced motion, he can send a bolt of silk rolling open down his counter, so that the light runs along it like water, and the color, hidden until now under its plain wrapping, comes welling out into the morning, deep and quiet and sure of itself. At a small table set a little apart sits the money changer, the saraf, and his trade is the strangest and quietest of all, for he deals in nothing but money itself. Before him is a worn velvet cloth, a small pair of fine scales, a set of tiny weights, and a flat polished stone the color of dark slate. The coins of the empire and of many lands beyond it pass across that cloth all day, gold and silver of 100 mintings, and his work is to know each one, its true weight and its true metal, and to give honest exchange between them. He works mostly in silence, the saraf, and mostly with his fingers and his eyes. He lifts a coin and turns it to the light and reads the worn legend on its face. He sets it on the little scale and watches the beam settle. He draws another across the dark stone and studies the color of the line it leaves. Gold of true measure against gold a shade too pale. Men trust him with their savings and lend through him and settle debts across the city by a word from his table, and all of it rests on the unhurried certainty of those two old hands. Through all the aisles belonging to no booth moves the broker, the delol, and of all the figures of the morning he is the most restless and the most necessary. He owns nothing and sells nothing of his own. Instead, he carries the goods of others up and down the hall, a folded shawl over one arm, a length of cloth across the other, calling out softly the thing and its asking price as he goes, so that a seller in one corner and a buyer in another, who would never have found each other, are quietly brought together by the man walking between them. Sometimes, when a thing of real value is to be sold, the delil will gather a little knot of interested men into a corner and run a slow open sale, holding the object up and naming the bids as they are murmured to him, lifting the price by small steps until no one will go higher. It is done quietly, almost gently, with none of the heat one might expect. For these are men who will sit beside each other again tomorrow, and the morning after that, and there is no profit, in such a life, in winning a thing so as to make an enemy of a neighbor. Near the doors wait the porters, the hamals, broad patient men who carry on their backs whatever is too heavy or too far to be carried by its owner. A porter's whole fortune is his strength, and a thick padded saddle of leather and cloth strapped across his shoulders, on which he can bear a load that two ordinary men could scarcely lift between them. They lean now against the cool stone by the entrance, waiting to be called, talking low among themselves, and watching the morning come and go with the deep, unbothered calm of men whose work is simply to be ready. In a sheltered corner an apprentice is making coffee, and the smell of it begins, faint and dark and bittersweet, to thread its way through the cooler smells of stone and cloth. He works over a small brazier of glowing charcoal, a long-handled copper pot in his hand, watching the dark surface with great seriousness, for it must be brought up just to the edge of rising and then drawn back, never once allowed to boil over. It is the lowliest task in the trade, and he does it with the gravity of a right, because he knows that the men he serves will judge him, a little, by it. When the coffee is ready, he carries it round in small cups on a swinging brass tray, and it is taken with a nod, or a word, and drunk slowly. This small bitter cup is the oil of the whole machine, for around it the real business of the morning is done. Two men with an account to settle will not stand and argue it. They will sit and send for coffee, and let it cool a little between them, and somewhere in the unhurried drinking of it the matter will quietly be agreed, as though the coffee and not the men had decided it. At a low desk against one pier sits the clerk, the keeper of the written word, and he is at his work already. Cross-legged before a sloping board, a reed pen in his hand and a small inkwell at his knee, he sets down in a fine flowing script the doings of those who cannot write, or who would rather a steady hand than their own, a loan made, a sum received, the terms of a sale, a debt acknowledged. His letters lean and link across the page in long, graceful lines, and what he writes will be believed, years hence, when every man who saw the bargain struck is dust. Near the door stands the public weigher, with the great steelyard scale that settles all disputes of quantity. When a bale of wool or a sack of some bulk good is to be sold by weight, it is brought to him, and he hangs it from the iron hook and slides the counterweight along the marked beam until it hangs level, and reads off the figure, and his word is taken by both buyer and seller as the plain truth. He is sworn to it, and watched, and the weights he uses are checked against the standard ones kept under seal, so that an oka in the Badistan is the same as an oka anywhere in the realm. These men, and a few others like them, are the standing population of the Badistan, the ones who are here every morning and will be here, with luck, for the rest of their working lives. They know each other better than brothers, having sat within a few paces of one another 6 days a week for 20 or 30 years, and they carry the small, comfortable knowledge of each other's habits. The one who is always first, the one who hums, the one whose cough means the damp weather is coming. A booth in the Badistan is not only a place of trade, it is for the man who holds it very nearly a second home. And around these settled men flow the others, the ones who belong to the wider market and only pass through, the runner sent from a shop outside to fetch a thing from a chest within, the merchant from another town in the cut of a far province, come to buy in bulk and gone again by noon. The servant of a great household sent to match a color of silk against a sample folded in his sleeve. The Badistan takes them all in and answers them and lets them go and closes again over their passing like still water over a thrown stone. By now the morning has reached its full and even working pace, neither slow nor fast, the pace of a wheel that has been turning long enough to forget it ever started. The light stands high and clear in the dome windows, the coffee goes round, the broker calls, the scales swing and settle, the pen moves across the page. And over it all hangs the soft, continuous murmur of 100 low voices, none of them raised, blending under the high stone vaults into a single sound, like a river heard from a long way off through trees. Let us follow a single small purchase, from its beginning to its end, for in the slow shape of one transaction the whole spirit of the place is held. A man has come into the Badistan with a quiet errand. He is to be married within the season, and he wishes to buy a length of good cloth, finer than anything he has owned, for the occasion. He is not a rich man, and the sum he can spend has been counted and recounted in his mind for weeks, and he comes in a little overawed by the hush and the dignity of the hall. He does not rush to the first booth he sees. He walks the aisle slowly, looking without seeming to look, letting his eye pass over the unrolled cloths, learning the colors and the lie of the place before he commits himself. This too is part of the custom, and the sellers understand it perfectly, and none of them calls out to press him. They let him drift, knowing that a man choosing a thing for once in his life must be allowed to choose it slowly, and that a sale hurried is half a sale lost. At last one cloth holds him, a length of deep blue-green silk with a faint figure woven into it that shows only when the light shifts, and he stops before its booth. The seller, an older man who has watched him come without appearing to, does not pounce. He simply lifts the cloth from where it lies and sets it nearer, and turns it so the figure catches the window light and says mildly that it is a good piece, woven in a famous town, and lets the silence come back, and waits. The buyer touches the cloth, because one must always touch it. He takes a fold of it between finger and thumb and feels its weight and its closeness, rubs it softly to hear the faint dry whisper good silk makes, holds it to the light to look for any flaw in the weave. He knows only a little of cloth, far less than the man across the counter, but he knows enough to show that he is not a fool to be hurried, and the showing of it is itself a kind of courtesy, a way of honoring the goods and the seller both. Only now does the matter of price arise, and it arises sidelong, almost shyly, the way such things should. The buyer does not ask the cost. He asks, rather, what such a piece might be worth, as one might ask after the weather, and the seller names a figure, gently, as an opening and not a demand. It is more than the buyer hoped, of course. It is always more. and he lets a small silence fall, and looks again at the cloth, and sighs a little, and the long, slow dance of the bargain has begun. It is not a quarrel, this bargaining, though a stranger might at first mistake it for one. It is closer to a slow and courteous game, with rules that both men know by heart, in which each praises and each demurs, each names a number and each lets it lie, and the true price is approached not in a leap, but by long, patient steps, like two people feeling their way toward each other across a dim room. There is pleasure in it, for both of them. The grave shared pleasure of a thing done properly and without haste. Coffee is sent for, of course, because a bargain of any weight is never settled dry. The two men sit, and the small cups come, and for a while they speak of other things entirely, of the buyer's coming marriage, of a mutual acquaintance, of the price of bread that season, while the cloth lies folded between them like a third party to the conversation, patient and unsold. The talk circles back to it by and by, as both know it will, but gently, in its own time, with no one driving it. And then, somewhere in the cooling of the second cup, the thing is done. A figure is named that both can live with, a little below the seller's first, and a little above the buyer's hope, and the buyer nods, and the seller spreads his hands as though giving up far more than he is, and that is the whole of it. No paper is needed for so small a sale, no clerk, no witness. The nod and the spread hands are the contract, and both men hold them sacred, for a trade is also a promise, and a promise lightly broken would unmake the whole quiet world they live in. The buyer draws his money from a cloth purse at his belt, counting it out into the seller's palm coin by coin, small worn pieces of silver, the weight of many careful weeks. The seller takes them without seeming to count, though he has counted everyone, and tucks them away, and only then turns to the cloth itself, folding it with a care that is almost tender, wrapping it in a clean, plain square against the dust of the street, and handing it across the counter with both hands, as one gives a gift. The buyer goes out with his small wrapped parcel held close, a little lighter in the purse and a great deal richer in his own eyes, carrying toward his coming marriage a thing chosen slowly and well. The seller watches him go with the mild satisfaction of a man who has made a fair sale to an honest buyer, and then turns and smooths the place on the counter where the cloth had lain, and looks down the aisle to see who else the morning may be bringing him. The whole exchange has taken the better part of an hour, and neither of them would have had it any shorter. Such small, slow sales go on all morning, at every booth, each one a little world of its own, and yet the whole never seems busy in the way a street is busy. There is no shouting, no scramble, no sense of anyone being hurried past. The pace is set by the goods themselves, which are precious and few and meant to be considered, and by the men who sell them, who have learned across long lives that nothing of value is ever bought or sold quickly, and that patience, here, is not merely a virtue but the very medium of the trade. Now and then a sale is larger, and then the clerk is called, and the matter is set down in writing. A merchant buys a whole bale of silk to carry to another town, or a household agent commissions a quantity of fine stuff for a wedding far grander than the cloth buyer's, and the terms are read out and agreed and recorded in the long flowing hand, and a copy given to each, and the bale marked with the new owner's sign. Even this, though, is done without heat, the pen moving as calmly over a great sum as over a small one. And when a thing is bought that must be carried, the porters by the door come into their own. One is called, and the bale is hoisted onto the padded saddle across his back, and he rises under it with a slow grunt and a small adjustment of his feet, and then sets off through the aisles and out into the street at a steady rolling walk. Bearing on one man's shoulders a weight of silk worth a small fortune, threading the crowd toward whatever han or quay or house it is bound for, sure-footed and unbothered as an ox. So the goods of the bedestined go out into the world, a little at a time, carried in wrapped parcels under arms and in great bales on bowed backs, dispersing through the city and beyond it to other towns and other lives, while into the emptied places new goods come up from the chests below. The hall is a kind of slow heart, drawing in and sending out, drawing in and sending out, never hurried and never still, keeping the quiet circulation of a whole region's finer wealth moving gently through its single stone chamber. Around the still stone heart of the bedestin spreads the rest of the market, looser and louder and more various, and it is worth stepping out for a while into its wider life. Out from each of the great doors run long covered streets, the Arasta rows, lined on both sides with open shops, and where the bedestin is hushed and dim, these rows are bright with the ordinary commerce of a city, the buying and selling of all the lesser things that people need not once in a lifetime but every single day. Each row, like the cells within, keeps mostly to one trade, so that walking out from the bedestin one passes through whole streets given over to a single craft. Here is the street of the slipper makers, hung with soft yellow and red leather. Here the makers of quilts and mattresses, their doorways stuffed with carded wool. Here the tinsmiths, whose tapping fills the air. Here the sellers of spices, whose open sacks of pepper and cinnamon and dried red things send a warm, sharp cloud out into the street that one walks into as into a different climate. The sounds of these outer streets are a great muddled music after the hush within. The tinsmith's hammer, the call of a man selling water, the bray of a mule somewhere being backed into a doorway, the soft, endless shuffle of feet over stone, the cries of the sellers naming their wares, all of it rising and folding together under the vaulted roofs into a warm, continuous din that is somehow restful rather than harsh, because it is so old and so unchanging, and asks nothing of the one who merely walks through it. Set among the rows, behind great gates, lie the Hans, the merchants' inns, and these are worlds again unto themselves. Each is a square of stone built around an open courtyard, 2 stories of small rooms looking inward, with stabling below and lodging above, and in the middle a little fountain or a small domed prayer room. Here the merchants from distant provinces lodge while their business lasts, their pack animals stalled below, their bales stored in locked rooms, and the courtyards stand full of the patient breathing of camels and mules resting from the road. The goods that fill the bedestin and the rows have nearly all come, at some stage, through such courtyards, carried in on the backs of animals over roads that wind for weeks across mountains and plains. The silk the cloth buyer chose this morning began as thread on a far loom, and traveled bound in a bale through rain and dust to reach this single quiet hall. The pepper in the spice seller's sack crossed seas and deserts before it ever scented the street. The market is the near and orderly end of a vast and untidy web that reaches out past the edge of the known world. Out at a corner where several rows meet stands the great public fountain, busy now in the full morning where it was lonely in the dark. A line of people waits at it with jars and skins and copper vessels, and the water sellers fill their containers to carry through the streets, and children dart in to drink from cupped hands. And the carved stone face of it runs and runs, as it has run for 100 years, cool and constant, asking nothing, given freely to all by some long-dead founder for the good of his soul. Among the shops move the sellers of food, for a market must feed those who keep it. A man carries a great round tray on his head, stacked with warm flat loaves. Another sells little savory pastries of thin pastry and cheese, kept warm under a cloth. A third has a barrow of pressed sweets, of nuts and honey and rosewater, cut into small squares. The smell of the warm bread crosses the smell of the spice and the smell of the leather, and a man could find his way blind through these streets by scent alone. The whole market keeps its time, not by any clock upon a wall, but by the slow turning of the day itself, and by the voice from the minarets that marks its stages. There is a man whose office is the keeping of the hours, the timekeeper, who reads the sun and the stars from a small room near the mosque and sets the times of prayer, and from his reckoning the muezzins take their cue. So the day is divided not into numbered hours, but into the spaces between the calls, dawn to mid-morning to the sun's height, and a man asked the time will answer by the prayers, not by a dial. And so when the sun stands at its height, the call comes again, the midday call, rolling out across the rooftops from one minaret and then another, and the market answers it in its own unhurried way. The shops are not closed exactly, but they loosen. A seller spreads a small mat at the back of his stall. Men drift toward the little prayer rooms in the Hans and the corners of the mosque courts, and for a while the great din of the streets thins and softens as a fire settles, before it gathers itself once more for the long, warm afternoon. Through all of this, the Bedestan at the center keeps its own deeper calm, less touched by the turning of the streets around it. Sound comes into it only softened, filtered through the long aisles and the thick doors, until the roar of the outer market is no more than a low and distant murmur beneath the high stone vaults. Step in from the bright, loud rows, and the change falls on you like cool water. The dimness, the hush, the slow, even light, the sense of having entered not just another room, but a slower kind of time. Within, the merchants have heard the midday call and answered it without breaking the rhythm of their morning. One or two have risen to pray at the back of their cells. The rest sit on, half drowsing in the warm, even light, watching the slow ovals from the dome windows creep across the floor, marking in them the only clock they need. A sale concludes here. A coffee is poured there. The clerk turns a page. The cat that owns the place has found a bar of sun and lies stretched full length in it, asleep. The Bedestan and the market around it are, in the end, two halves of a single thing, the still center and the moving rim, and each needs the other. The loud rows could not exist without the safe heart that anchors them, the strong room where the day's taking sleep and the season's stock is hoarded, and the quiet hall would have no purpose without the bright living streets that feed it and draw from it. Together they make the whole slow machine of a city's trade, turning over, morning after morning, century upon century, in the same patient grooves. It has all happened before, exactly this, and it will all happen again. Tomorrow the watchman will finish his round, and the keys will come, and the doors will groan open, and the lamps will be lit and put out, and the coffee made, and the cloth unrolled and folded and carried away, and a man somewhere will choose, slowly, a thing he has wanted for a long time. None of it is new, none of it is meant to be. The deep comfort of the place lies precisely in its sameness, in the knowledge that it asks nothing of the day but that the day be, once again, itself. And as the midday warmth settles fully over the city, the great pace of the morning begins, almost imperceptibly, to ease. The first rush of buyers has thinned. The porters have made their early runs and gone back to lean against the wall. The brokers call a little less often, and a kind of softness comes over the hall, the gentle heaviness of a long task more than half done. The afternoon will bring its own slow business, but for now the Bedestan breathes out and slows, and the light lies long and golden across the worn old stones. And now we will only stay and let the morning go on without us asking anything more of it. The light moves across the stone. That is all that is happening really. Under the slow domes, the light is moving across the stone, very gently, an oval at a time, from one old chest to the next, the way it moved yesterday, and the way it will move tomorrow, and the way it has moved over these same stones for longer than anyone can say. The cat sleeps in its bar of sun and does not stir. The merchants sit half drowsing at their booths, their hands folded, their eyes resting on nothing, and the low murmur of their few quiet words rises into the vaults and is lost. There is no hurry anywhere. There is nothing that must be done before some hour, no bell that will ring, no moment that will be missed. The morning simply continues, soft and slow and warm, asking nothing, holding everything gently in its open hand. High up, the small windows in the crowns of the domes hold their pale circles of sky, and the light comes down from them in soft and dusty shafts, leaning a little more, now, toward the afternoon. You could watch those shafts for a long time and feel no wish to do anything else. They do not flicker, they do not hurry. They only lean by the smallest degree, hour upon hour, turning the great dim room slowly the way a sundial turns, without a sound, without an effort, without an end. Think, if you like, as your eyes grow heavy, of all that the old hall holds, sleeping in its chests in the dark below the light, the widow's small gold, sealed and safe, the orphan's portion, waiting quietly for a child not yet grown, the deeds of houses, the records of debts, the saved coin of careful years. All of it lying still and guarded under the same patient stone, kept by nothing more than the long agreement of honest men that such things shall be kept. And the lamp on the near wall that was lit before dawn and pinched out when the day came, hangs cold in its iron bracket now, waiting for the dusk, when it will be lit again. It has been lit and put out so many thousand times that the stone above it is darkened with the gentle soot of years. It asks nothing of anyone through the long bright middle of the day. It only hangs and waits, and will be ready, as it is always ready, when the light at last begins to fail. The great room breathes, slowly, as it breathed in the dark before the doors were ever opened. Cool air moves through it without sound, drawn in at the thresholds and up toward the high, small windows, the same slow breath it has always drawn, in and out, the patient respiration of a deep stone place. You can almost feel it, if you are still enough. The long, even, unhurried breathing of the hall in the warm, dim afternoon, going on and on. Far off, beyond the thick doors and the long aisles, the market still murmurs, but you can hardly hear it now, and it does not matter. It is only the sound of the world going on, of carts and voices and a hammer somewhere, soft and blurred and very far away, like the sound of rain heard from inside a warm room, the kind of sound that does not call you out but folds you deeper in, a low and even sound with no edges, that the mind lets go of without even noticing it has let go. Notice, if you are still a little awake, the colors of the goods where they rest in the dim light, gone soft and deep now that no one is turning them to the window. The blue-green silks lie folded and quiet, their figures sleeping in the weave. The dull gold of the jeweler's tray gives back the light without a glitter. The dark reds and the olive browns of the wools and the leathers settle into one another like the colors of a forest floor. Nothing is bright here, and nothing is meant to be. Everything is muted and warm and at rest. The porters have settled into a doze against the cool stone by the door, their great padded saddles set down beside them, their heads nodding slowly forward in the warmth. They have carried their loads and made their runs, and there is nothing now to do but wait, and waiting, for a tired man in a warm doorway, slides very easily into a half-sleep. Their breathing slows and lengthens, and one of them murmurs something in a dream, and the morning holds them as gently as it holds the sleeping cat and the resting silk. Long ago, someone stood where these stones now stand, and imagined all of this before a single block was laid. The doors and the domes, the cells and the chests, the slow, safe mornings stretching out into a future he would never see. He built it, and endowed it, and set down in careful words how it should be kept and what its rents should feed, and then he died, as all founders die, and passed out of memory. But the hall he dreamed goes on, holding its quiet mornings, doing its slow good, a kindness sent forward across the centuries by a hand long since turned to dust. How many mornings has the hall seen, just like this one? More than anyone could ever count. Morning after morning the doors have groaned open, and the lamps have bloomed along the walls, and the light has come down through the domes and crept across the floor. And morning after morning the merchants have settled into their places, and the coffee has gone round, and the cloth has been unrolled and folded away again. And each of those mornings was, to the people in it, simply the day, the only day, the ordinary endless present that they lived in and thought would never change. And the generations have turned over within it like the light across the floor. The old jeweler learned his trade as a boy at the elbow of a man now dead, and one day a boy at his own elbow will take his place at the booth by the pier, and will grow old there in his turn, and teach another. The faces change, slowly, the way the light changes, so gradually that no single morning ever seems different from the last, and yet across the long years everything is renewed, everyone replaced, while the stone hall stays, and holds them all, one after another, in the same patient light. None of this needs holding in the mind. Let it go, all of it, the founder and the generations, the jeweler and the clerk, the coins and the cloth and the careful chests. They will all go on perfectly well without your remembering them. Keep only, if you keep anything, the warm dim light, and the slow turning dust, and the long even breath of the cool stone room, and let even those grow faint and far as the warmth of the afternoon settles over you, and your thoughts begin, gently, to come untied. The light moves across the stone, the cat sleeps on. A coin is counted, somewhere, very softly, into a waiting palm, and the small clean sound of it is swallowed by the vaults. A page turns under the clerk's slow hand. A length of cloth is folded and smoothed and set aside. None of it disturbs the great calm. Each small sound only deepens it. The way a single far bird call deepens the silence of a wood, and the morning gathers all these small soft sounds into itself and goes on, unbroken. It does not need us to watch it. That is perhaps the gentlest thing about it. The hall will keep its slow morning whether anyone observes it or not, the light leaning, the dust turning, the lamp waiting, the chests sleeping, the breath going in and out of the cool stone room. We have only leaned in for a while, as one leans for a moment over a still well to look at the water, and we may lean back out again whenever we wish, and the morning will not even know that we have gone. So let the eyes close now, if they are ready. There is nothing here you need to remember, no name to keep, no thread to follow to its end. The light will go on moving across the stone without you. The lamp will be lit again at dusk without you. The doors will be barred tonight and open tomorrow, and the slow, sweet morning will gather itself once more around the old stone heart of the market, exactly as it has this morning, whether you are here to see it or away in some far country of sleep. The light moves across the stone, and the room breathes, and far away the market murmurs like rain. The cat sleeps. The lamp waits. The chests keep their quiet trust, and the morning goes on soft and slow and warm and unhurried, holding the old hall gently in its open hand, asking nothing of anyone, only that the day, once more, be itself. Rest now. The light will keep moving across the stone, all through the long, warm afternoon, whether you are watching or not.
You've reached the end of tonight's archive. If you're still awake, thank you for staying. And if you drifted off somewhere in the dark, then it did its work. Rest now. The next chapter will be here when you are. Sleep well. This has been Archive Whispers.